Squint.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the #1 place to give the internet even more internet by making your own website. This has been a big year for one-upmanship in rugby. Razzie Erasmus saw Warren Gatland raise an eyebrow to a TMO and turned it into the Swan Lake of refereeing discourse. Quade Cooper saw Mornay Stain come back to last-minute winners and decided he not wanted to just do the same, but make it hurt Mornay. And Bristol saw Harlequins concede try after try whilst attempting to play attractive rugby and went, hold my 31 unanswered points. So, as a special treat, the rugby gods decided they'd one-up last week's intense thriller between the two best teams in the world, decided by a very late kick, and give us an all-time classic between those same two best teams in the world, coming down to 4 seemingly last-minute winning kicks in maybe the most intense and insane last 5 minutes rugby has seen in, a decade? So, how did the Springboks eventually come out on top, and is there really anything separating these two teams? Can you really call either team the winner in a game like that? Yes, you can, the Springboks won. Even if Elton Yankees had somehow catastrophically missed that red time penalty, I still think this match would have been the best the Springboks have played in 2021. It was obvious from just a few minutes watching that something was different. They were playing with a new kind of pace and dynamism, a new purpose and focus. However, everything they were doing wasn't really new at all. The Springboks, under the current coaching ticket, have built everything on one core tactic. Play 5 or 6 phases. If nothing comes, kick it away and apply pressure. This is smart, effective, and prevents the team ever going backwards. It keeps them moving forwards. However, the difference between the last few weeks and Saturday wasn't the tactics, it wasn't that. This policy remained very much in place. The difference was how they used those 5 or 6 phases. To examine what's different, let's look at what the Springboks did with those 6 phases in a similar starting position last week compared to this week against the same opposition. This is from the first test. The Boks take the ball in here and attempt to maul. It grinds to a halt, but Umbanambi finds some room and breaks off. Instead of looking to capitalise on front foot ball, de Klerk is already thinking about kicking. He decides he doesn't like the position here, so he looks up, sees Mapimpi has a tiny bit of space and passes to him. However, from here, all the phases the Boks play are just about de Klerk trying to get himself into a perfect position to launch the kick on that 6th phase. They're not looking to attack, only to prepare. The kick itself is perfectly good, but that doesn't change how unthreatening those 5 phases were. It's all set up for a punchline, no actual interest in the content or the phases themselves. On Saturday, the Boks went full Monty Python and decided being funny throughout was more important than punchlines. Vermeulen here takes it in, and de Klerk whips it away 2 seconds later. Unshay carries, and once again de Klerk has the ball away in just over 2 seconds. And here they deploy a new structure I'll come back to later. 2 forwards and a back initially forming a pod, then splitting apart. Ioane reads it, but Leroux makes a great offload to Nkosi in space. He trips, but once again South Africa have multiple runners set, and Faf fires it a third of the pitch across the second the ball is available. The Springboks play their 6 phases, all of them taking less than 4 seconds to complete, and it isn't until the ball is slow, it takes more than that. Here, it's too slow for Khaleesi to hit his line that they eventually consider kicking. At which point, de Klerk hangs a brilliant kick. Expecting a shallow kick, New Zealand have committed the full complement of Barrett, but Bodie only drops there to 22 with Geordie further back and Scott retreating to block. So de Klerk kicks it slap bang in the middle of this Barrett triangle. Bodie and Geordie each take their eye off it momentarily to check if the other is closer, and Scott gets in the way. It's a really hard ball for everyone but Mapimpi to judge, who has a clear line and can force a knock on. New Zealand do learn from this. The next time the Boks try it, the cover is far deeper, closer to where de Klerk might aim, and Geordie Barrett's block is far smaller yet more effective than his brother's. The other biggest change in the Springboks over the last 7 days was how they dealt with the All Blacks' biggest strengths. Because despite tying the series, New Zealand have delivered numerous masterclasses on how to break down and open up the South African defence, the best and clearest of which being the opening try last week by Will Jordan, a man I swear has one of the automatically generated player faces from Rugby 04. Incidentally, right, by the way, did you know there's currently no dedicated internet archive of all the automated player faces in old EA rugby games? Like, not a single website dedicated to it. It's frankly ridiculous and overdue, but thankfully there is an easy way to tackle this, and it's called Squarespace. If you've never heard of Squarespace before, welcome to the internet, and you're going to be astonished by just how easy it is to create a proper, exciting, and frankly rather beautiful website, categorizing faces Will Jordan easily could have had or otherwise, using their templates and drag and drop tools. And better yet, if you're interested in, say, putting all the key assets from Rugby Challenge 2 online in full, or creating a website for your business or anything else that's far less important, you can do it at a discount price by using the offer code Squidge Rugby, or just clicking the link in the description. An internet's worth of categorizing vintage rugby video games awaits you. The 2021 Springboks have become the favourite team of multitaskers and narcoleptics everywhere by deliberately elongating the time between passages of play, giving themselves as many breathers as possible to prevent their bloody massive pack, who range in size from rhino to oil tanker, from tiring too much. So Will Jordan and his Squarespace face scored on 2 minutes and 8 seconds. That brought to a close the match's first passage to play, and one the All Blacks themselves deliberately elongated and worked to be as exhausting as possible. The Springboks kick for touch twice, but both times New Zealand throw in quickly to keep the game alive, to try and disorganise and tire that pack. And they're not far off managing that. As Bridge takes the first quick throw, the Springboks have just 4 Type 5 forwards covering about 30 metres of the pitch against 2 Barrett brothers. However, the situation is saved by Faf de Klerk's work rate, spotting this and absolutely herring it downfield to close down both Bodie and Geordie's options. Barrett Jr. kicks again. People often talk about how the best way to beat a big team is to move them about, and imagine that means playing running and passing rugby, but for the All Blacks, they did that by kicking, forcing them to just jog back and forth as the ball sails over their head. It's exhausting and helps disorganise the line. We see this after Geordie Barrett takes the second quick throw of the passage. LaRue hangs a pretty good bomb, but the All Blacks activate the second half of their plan to open South Africa up. Pack aside, South Africa's other key strength is the fact they boast the best defence in the world. Springbok defence is not about scramble, as per one-time holder of that title Sean Edwards of Wales. It's all about being and remaining organised. It's systemic, not personal. Look at this passage from Saturday. Bowden Barrett's sheer pace on the ball causes Nkosi to panic and bite in when he doesn't need to. It's an understandable human error. But the Springbok system is built so every player drifts outwards towards the wing if the ball surpasses them. So they catch the winger, complete the tackle and reset. No problem. No matter how fast New Zealand's ball, no matter what the shapes they're pulling, they can't work around the box as the system closes them down until eventually the ball is lost at breakdown and Franz Steer can clear it into Timbuktu. So back to that first test, possession changing hands so regularly has already got the box defence somewhat disorganised, and New Zealand look to capitalise further. After so much back and forth, NZ sense it's time to play. 4 All Blacks carry into contact in just 9 seconds. Now, the average speed of ball, the average ruck speed on attack in Test Rugby right now in 2021 is about 4.2 seconds, meaning the All Blacks are playing at pretty much double the pace of a standard Test side. 7 Springboks are forced to make tackles in those 9 seconds, and whilst they all get back up to their feet, they don't have time to reintegrate into the system. New Zealand attack the box with such pace and pure skill, it doesn't matter if the things they're doing are broadly kind of shit at times. These 2 forwards are never options for Barrett. There's only one realistic choice for the 10, and again for Ioane at centre. Ant reads this so easily and shuts it down, trusting his inside man to actually make the tackle, but New Zealand's careful build-up has left the tiring front rowers here, and Barrett's subsequent break is kind of a fluke, but it's a classic case of the harder you work, the luckier you get. 2 good dummy runs here, creating confusion amongst the front rowers in a manner they weren't expecting, the ball headed in the opposite direction. Geordie Barrett breaks through, and then his brother throws a really quite horrible pass, which turns out to be the final ingredient New Zealand really needed to break the line. The Springbok system is built to calculate for human judgment, not error. This mistake doesn't fit with any of their contingency plans. Cody Taylor recovers and does superbly with a baffled Springbok line all out of sorts, missing tackle after tackle. He then links up with Will Jordan, who sprints it in from 30 metres. The All Blacks attempt to do something similar this weekend, hoping to hit the ground running under the post by keeping the first passage long. However, there are 2 changes. When they run it, the Springboks now do scramble superbly, pincering in on Taylor to create a trap he can't escape, but more importantly, they got on top in the kicking game, adapting the tactics to look for grass, eventually forcing the All Blacks to be the ones who call for the mark, slow it down, and look to kick to touch to end that first passage. But they weren't stagnant for long. After all, on the grand list of things the All Blacks do best, scoring tries is second only to enabling domestic violence, so it's no surprise they opened up South Africa a few times for seemingly simple scores. This, finished by my rugby rival analysis YouTube personality Surveyor, won't have been the move New Zealand had called, but it's something they clearly looked at in the week that they could exploit. South Africa typically defend with pinball of rage, Bongi and Benambi at the tail of the line out. Using the hooker here is quite a trend at the minute. We see it with a lot of teams, and we often see oppositions try to exploit the front rower's lack of pace, but the All Blacks instead capitalise on his aggression. They throw to the tail and just put Webber right in his way. Benambi slaughters him, but not before he can whip the pass away. With the first defender gone, RD Surveyor cleverly and subtly blocks the second man, Sia Khaleesi, making a point of never looking at the captain, but clearly changing his line to obstruct him. This opens a hole on the inside of Andre Pollard, and the sharpest, quickest fly half in the world is always going to take that. Ioane and Surveyor then run great support lines, timing their runs excellently to allow the captain to dive over and put New Zealand ahead in their quest to remain top of the world rankings for both rugby union and rates of domestic violence in OECD countries. And speaking of domestic abusers, Severi's try came from one of the few tricks the All Blacks have been deploying to try and get around the Boks' infamous in-to-out defence, something they also frequently use in the World Cup meeting between these two. Most cross kicks do just that, they go across the field from one edge to the other, but the All Blacks have adopted a twist just to target how the Springboks defend the wings. The Boks love their winger to shoot up and cut off an attack, and the All Blacks want to coax the wing, in this case Mapimpi, out of line, trying to make that big read and hit. So they launch the kick from midfield, where he's more likely to step out and make the read, giving Mapimpi time to consider stepping in, just far enough to give Reece the time to finish and score the try. They also exploited their into-out defence with this nice beat. The structure means there's a bigger than usual gap between the 13 and the wing, so Ioane targets this man and offloads, and it leaves a big hole for Leonard Brown with support outside, where most teams would have the winger tighter to tackle as the offload is taken. However, this attack goes on to highlight a trend. The All Blacks are deadly on the first few phases, really, really lethal, but the longer they have the ball, the less threatening they seem to become. It's fine that they don't break teams down through phase play like England or Scotland, but stuff like this, David Havili almost forgetting where to stand repeatedly when it's not first phase, just plonking himself next to Barrett in a manner that adds nothing to the attack and actually takes options away from his 10, is, depending on your perspective, either worrying or enticing. Especially because it's the opposite of the Springboks on Saturday, whose phase play picked up dramatically between last week and this, all thanks to something that's been there the whole time. In their rare moments out from box kicking this year, the Springboks have been adopting a new and far more dynamic attacking structure. In theory, the shape South Africa have been running in 2021 is extremely similar. It's basically the same as the one utilised by Australia, Japan, Wales and Scotland. Probably the foremost jouet test teams out there right now. However, the difference is South Africa have adopted the shape, but not the tactics. The players got into the position for the kind of exciting rugby those other teams run, then they just kicked it. South Africa's newfound dynamism felt like Erasmus and Naineber cherry-picking innovative pieces of rugby they'd seen from Wales, France and Japan, and making them 8 times as brutal by putting them into the Bokkify machine, which I'm convinced is an actual invention they actually have. Like, there's no other way they create so many second rows. They just put children into the Bokkify machine and it comes out as hard J. So I'm convinced that's what actually happens. I'm sure that's a real thing. So let's do this quickly, right? At the World Cup, Japan pioneered a new attacking structure known as the 1-3-2-2, which is a really cool, exciting way of getting the most out of a smaller pack by splitting them into units of, you guessed it, 1, 3, 2 and 2, and having them all interlink as they carry the ball, just making them far more dynamic and unpredictable. Wales under Wayne Pivac and Stephen Jones copied this but twisted it, making the backs and forwards interchangeable, meaning the entire attack became even more dynamic and unpredictable. France meanwhile built their entire attack around giving scrum half and Coke can shape maestro Antoine Dupont as many options as possible, often as many as 6 or 7, all far from the immediate ruck, like we saw with de Klerk earlier. So the Springboks spread out their running options. The carriers were wider, spaced to each take the pass, instead of being virtually pre-latched in the previous weeks. Here de Klerk plays it fast, but Khaleesi times his run perfectly. No latches in place, he can drift onto the ball, meaning he's hitting Ioane's unprepared shoulder instead of careering straight into him as per previously, and it makes for a far better carry. This is the kind of dynamism the Boks are looking for. Whereas France are looking for holes, the Boks are just looking for weak shoulders, which are much more common, and they trust their sheer size and power will do the rest. But the stuff stolen from Wales and Japan is much more interesting. Here, Billy LaRue takes a high ball, which some South African fans would have you believe he hasn't done since 2012, and drops it off to Pollard on the crash ball. LaRue then slots back into fly-off position and tells the forwards where to crash it up so he can best place his kick the next phase. This is an excellent kick too. It's too far for Barrett, and it's at a weird diagonal angle that makes it really tricky for Ioane to read and run onto, meaning Nkosi can beat him in the air. Smith carries, and LaRue remains in control. The Boks have adopted their 1-3-2-2 shape, but so used to the big one-up carriers they've been using all year, the All Blacks ignore that shape and condense around Diego. LaRue calls it at the back from an ambitious angle, noticing Retallick is eyeing up Diolande, and he fires a beautiful flat ball to Etzebeth, hitting the hole outside his opposite number, who smashes it so far over the game line. Wales style, Diolande acts as a forward and clears out, giving quicker ball for LaRue, who has single-handedly created the space for himself to make the half break before offloading to Pollard. With Pollard and LaRue then out the game, Faf takes control and fires it onto the first runner, Diego with Diolande in support, and then Big Trev with Unchained support. The fast two-man pods Japan pioneered in action. This is then excellent cheating by Cody Taylor, slowing the ball down just long enough to make a difference, but short enough the referee won't penalise him. LaRue then opts for the chip, and it bounces just quite unfortunately from a pimpy. This kick is 100% on with Reese up flat and Barrett out of position, but you wonder if the grubber was the better option. However, it just goes to show the sheer pace and dynamism the Boks can create using this shape and structure with their power, but they weren't quite able to get it running all game. For the first 7 minutes after half time, the Springboks resorted to their old structure, playing tight off 9. It's only once Elton Yankees, who I've been saying is good the whole time by the way, just want to point that out, came on, the things picked back up. Compare Pollard waiting, letting the forwards do their thing, to Yankees in exactly the same situation, always there calling the play and telling de Klerk which is the best forward to choose, whilst remaining an option himself if things do open up. He just adds a kind of extra threat behind each carrier. However, he also remains patient and doesn't call the ball to himself in the 22 until the Boks' third visit there with him on the pitch. Here, and it's a crucial touch to put Mapimpi over in the corner. An excellent miss pass with everyone focused on Pollard. The Springboks won on Saturday largely because they mixed this far more dynamic approach with their traditional bash, boom, hoof, 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 hoof plan, and they could not do that without one of Billy LaRue or Elton Yankees on the field. Both are players much maligned by fans, particularly in South Africa, but they're both excellent players, crucial to how the Springboks play when they're at their best. They need one of them on the field, and Yankee showed just how good he was in that unbelievable final 5 minutes. It's a weird game to cover because so much of what the All Blacks got right was too basic to be worth talking about, but they just keep their patience. There's nothing ever really on here, and only Mwang is looking to force anything. They just wait because the Bok discipline is still pretty, something to work on, and they can just hold on until Frans Steyn commits a stupid penalty and they get their shot to take the lead. The Boks then take the drop goal really nicely. No one ever expects you to go for it early without setting for how many ever phases, and it catches the All Blacks off guard and gives Yankees the time he needs to nail it. Then Geordie Barrett steps up again and he also nails it, and you think the All Blacks can just eke this one out from here. This is going to be quite easy, except the new laws strike. World Rugby received a change in protocol about pre-binding, meaning you can't be latched, as they call it, onto a teammate before taking the ball to carry it in, and that causes a moment's doubt in RD Surveyor's mind, desperate not to be penalised in this kind of desperate situation, and it's just the moment that Dwayne Vermeulen needs to jackal and give Frans Steyn the opportunity to smash it into the Black 22, and from there it's fairly simple. I felt like in the fixture 3 years ago, the All Blacks' composure slipped, and I don't know if it's ever recovered. The offside call here is so easy, obvious, and dumb. You can't help but feel any team making it in the final minute deserves to be losing the number 1 ranking. It's an easy penalty, and I don't think many teams make this mistake. It leaves the All Blacks in a really weird place. These are definitely the 2 best teams in the world, but it's really, really hard to tell how big the gap is beyond that. And that's why it's so exciting to be so close to this autumn tour now, where we finally get to stack the North against the South for the first time since the Rugby World Cup 2 years ago, and find out which hemisphere will get to claim one-upmanship for 2021 once and for all. Thanks for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to everyone that supports them on Patreon and makes these kind of things still possible. It's hugely, hugely appreciated. And I am going to move on and look at Australia's 4 wins in a row in the not so distant future, and then obviously we have the Autumn Internationals coming up in the slightly more distant but still not that distant future, and I also want to say that until the All Blacks start working with charities and organisations that help prevent or work with survivors of domestic abuse, I'm going to continue referring to them as the team of domestic abuse enablers, because that's, to me, who they are at the minute. So thank you very much for watching. Unless you're a member of the All Blacks management, in which case you've got a responsibility and you should be doing something about it. Same goes for London Irish. Anyway, as you were, have a lovely day, and I'll see you very soon with some Australian stuff.
And Billy LaRue, mistake.